Hello and welcome to the Timlin22 YouTube channel. Today I am going to be looking at three different pieces of media to show you how leaders and politicians gain power through the subliminal manipulation of others due to the lack of a clear definition of what power really is. Number 1. The Foot Soldier of Birmingham.
It's called Foot Soldier. It looks simple, but that statue is not what you think.
Looking at the actual photo of the Foot Soldier of Birmingham, you can see the modern-day statue presents the police in a more powerful way, while the real photo is more docile in comparison. The statue has been dedicated by the mayor, and it features a short commemoration that praises the rebellion for fighting for civil rights. This mayor has smartly used a more aggressive portrayal of events, along with his speech, to look like an apology for past issues with the commemoration. The community sees a good thing the mayor has acknowledged, and combined with a good political record, a strong basis for re-election is born. A similar manipulation of power is seen in the novel 1984. You have the party, run by Big Brother, that at its past media to make the party look more perfect and nobody complains, so the party stays in power forever. The Birmingham mayor has tweaked history just enough to benefit his re-election chances while still being historically accurate enough not to be called into question. The politician has used his power to manipulate the people into believing he can be considered for re-election. Number 2. Eric Liu's TED Talk on why ordinary people need to understand power.
That brings me to my definition of power, which is simply this: the capacity to make others do what you would have them do. Sounds menacing, doesn't it? We don't like to talk about power. We find it scary. We find it somehow evil.
This TED Talk relates to how politicians gain subliminal power by showcasing how general lack of knowledge about civics allows leaders to take advantage of their voters. In the talk, Mr. Liu talks about how civics, or politics, has become a bit of a boring subject that not many people care about. He also talks about how people stereotypically view power as negative because they don't actually take the time to explore what power really is. These issues are the main problem. Politicians can now take advantage of these factors because all they have to do is present themselves and their power as not being negative. If you've noticed, there is a huge movement in politics where leaders are trying to become more relatable. Leaders talk about where they grew up and spend lots of their time talking and campaigning face to face. This makes the candidate seem like a good, friendly, relatable person who will use their power positively to benefit the community. The true details of the campaign plan are lost, because that part is largely ignored or skipped over during conversation. The only campaign plan information focuses on the things that everyone understands, like improving taxes, another benefit. And these shortcuts allow people into power who have no plans to provide other benefits to the community other than their basic promises. But since the majority of people see that the promises are filled, they will strongly consider re-electing the leader, and nothing other than filling the basic campaign promises ever has to get done. Number 3. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is a 1939 movie that relates to the thesis through its plot. The movie focuses on a man named Jefferson Smith, who is appointed senator by a corrupt party head named Mr. Taylor, because Taylor believes Mr. Smith is naive and will submit to Mr. Taylor's demands. When Mr. Smith proposes a bill to create a boy ranger camp on the site of a dam project Mr. Taylor was illegally setting up through a conflicting bill, Mr. Taylor forces Mr. Payne, who is another senator and an idol of Mr. Smith, to destroy Mr. Smith in scandal. Mr. Taylor signifies the ultimate politician that uses his power to exploit things to further his own political standing. He manipulates Mr. Payne into carrying out all of his plans, even after Mr. Payne originally declines to help. Taylor also works towards building a smear campaign in Mr. Smith's state by influencing the local newspapers and radio stations with false truths. Mr. Taylor takes advantage of the fact that there was no definition of good power or bad power at the time to control Mr. Payne, the newspapers, and the radio stations. Mr. Payne and the media feel like they must follow Mr. Taylor's demands because Mr. Taylor is in power. If good and bad power was defined, the groups controlled could see that Mr. Taylor was negatively using his power to further his ambitions and could make better decisions on whether they should help or not.